Good morning, everyone. Welcome to CalRecycle's Recycling and Disposal Reporting System webinar. My name is Steve Sander. I use he, him, or they, them pronouns, and I'm a senior environmental sciences specialist with CalRecycle's Policy Development and Analysis Office, Knowledge Integration section. I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. I'd like to begin by welcoming Dan Brown, Environmental Program Manager 2, who manages the policy office, to the virtual podium to start us off with some opening remarks. So please put your virtual hands together for Dan.
I appreciate it, Steve. So good morning, everybody. I really appreciate you being able to join us today. We, feel very strongly that strong communication with all of our different interested parties helps us achieve just better reporting and better collaboration between us and the folks that need to use the system. And so we're grateful for the work that goes into that. We're grateful for the information that you provide to us in that system. And we're excited to roll out some additional changes that have been necessitated by SB 343 from the statutes of 2021 and AB 881, also statutes of 2021. So both of those bills required us to collect some additional information, and after the rulemaking process that concluded last year, it's time to start getting those changes in. So, we've been collecting information. We've been working on the recycling and disposal reporting system with you all for almost 6 years now in terms of active reporting, and then some time of development before that, which is wild to think of. It still feels like a pretty new system. But, I have to say, kind of looking at the big picture, I've been really impressed by how, people have been, learning and gaining proficiency in the reporting system. And I hope that we can continue making it accessible and work with you to continue improving and making sure that we all have the best available data to work with. So really grateful for your participation. Hope to hear some great questions and hope we can provide some clarity where you might have some questions and things like that. And with that, I am going to pass it to Eric Payne, who is by far much more the expert than I am on some of these new reporting changes.
Thanks for that, Dan, and thanks, Steve, for being our moderator. So as Dan mentioned, I'm Eric Payne. I also work in the policy office, and I will be giving today's presentation on the updates to the RDRS user interface that we've made pursuant to the changes in the regulations. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. Before I begin, I guess I should note that I posted today's meeting notice in the chat. And if you go to the meeting notice, you'll be able to download a PDF of today's presentation. So you can already download that presentation and look through the slides at your leisure. Just wanted to quickly highlight that. All right. So to begin, first of all, we have our standard disclaimer language here. I'm not going to read through all of this, but the general gist is that this presentation should not be construed as formal legal counsel from CalRecycle to you. If you do have legal questions, you'll need to consult your own legal staff. Also, the information in this presentation is based on our current understanding of the regs, which may change. So today we're really just going to focus on recent updates to the RDRS user interface. At the end, we will have a question and answer session. If you have more questions that don't come up during the webinar, or if you're watching by webcast rather than Zoom, you can send your questions to us at rdrs@calrecycle.ca.gov. Okay, so in today's presentation, I'll give you a very brief background on the regulations and talk about our overall purpose and what are the changes that we're making to the user interface. The very brief background is that, as Dan mentioned, we did a rulemaking in 2023 to update the RDRS regulations, Title 14 of the California Code of Regulations, 18815.1 through 13. These regulations were approved by OAL in January of last year, and they became effective in April 1st, also of last year, so about a year ago. Some of the changes, however, were written to take effect specifically in 2025 Q1, which is why we're having this webinar now. We're talking about those changes that took effect 2025 Q1. Reporting for that begins in a few weeks for contract haulers and a month for other entities and so on. All right. So the purpose of today's webinar is really just to overview the changes to the RDRS user interface. I'm not going to cover the regulations in detail. For more information on the regulations themselves, you can refer to our rulemaking archive for the 2023 rulemaking. The link shown on the slide. And again, that is the PowerPoint for this is already posted on the public notice, so you can have access to those links already. And last May, we also did a webinar for the regulations, the overview of the regulations themselves, not the user interface. Again, that link is shown on the slide. And of course, it's always a good idea to review the actual legal text yourself. So that's what the regulation link is. So today I'll go through four changes to the RDRS user interface. These relate to reporting of SWIS, or solid waste system information, collection method, mixed plastic waste export, and constituent material types. Where these changes differ by activity type, I'll highlight that in the slides. And with that, just go ahead and get started. So subsequent slides assume that we have logged into RDRS. I'm not going to show you that.
Apologies, Eric. I can't hear you. I'm not sure if that was the case for anybody else.
Can you hear me talking, Dan?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay, stop hearing me.
We can hear you now, I think.
I guess when did you stop hearing me, so I know how far to go back? Apologies.
Pretty close to the beginning of this slide is when I stopped being able to hear you.
Okay. All right. Apologies for that. Well, I'll just say I'm not going to show you how to log into RDRS, but the login link is here on the slide. And I wanted to note that subsequent images in the rest of the PowerPoint are all come from our testing database. They don't come from anyone's real account, so we're not showing anyone's real information. This is all just testing information created for the purpose of this presentation. So let's start with SWIS. If your entity is registered in the Solid Waste Information System, or SWIS, you must report your SWIS ID and SWIS activity type in RDRS. The slides that I'm going to show you will show how to add SWIS to an existing reporting, since most people are already registered in RDRS, but the process is basically the same for creating new entities. So step one, after you have logged into RDRS, will be to select the relevant organization site. So that will be up to you to determine which of your organization sites has reporting entities that require SWIS. And the image on the slide shows the home screen for RDRS, and I've circled in red, are just a fake organization site. So let's assume that you clicked on that select link. That will take you to the summary page for the organization site. And there's a table to the right that says reporting entity activities that lists all of the that are in the organization. And you'll need to select the specific reporting entity from that list that needs a SWIS. So assuming you use those buttons, you'll be taken to the reporting entity activity details page for that entity. And there's a box on the screen that shows various information about the entity, such as its name, activity type, ID if one's present, and so on. If you click the edit button for that box there, you'll be able to edit information on this screen. I wanted to note that if the edit button is inactive, not clickable, that may indicate a permissions issue. We have had people mention this to us before, so I just wanted to highlight that what that could mean is your particular account doesn't have permissions, the appropriate permissions to edit those details. There are a few slides at the very end of the presentation, which I don't intend to go through, but we can if needed, that just show how someone can edit permissions for another person in the account. All right, so assuming you've clicked, you'll be taken to a page that allows you to edit those details, and you'll be required to enter a SWIS ID and a SWIS activity type if your entity is a transfer processor or disposal facility, because all of those activity types require SWIS. For the other SWIS activity types, for the other RDRS activity types, excuse me, SWIS ID is optional, which I'll show on the next slide. 2 points here. The system is smart enough to know the kinds of SWIS IDs that are valid. So you'll have to enter a valid SWIS ID. The system will check to see whether that SWIS ID exists. We can't, of course, know whether your SWIS ID is right for your particular entity. We're assuming that you know what you have. And once you enter a SWIS ID, the SWIS activity type dropdown, the second image on the right, will populate with the appropriate options for that SWIS ID. So for example, 42-AA-0015 has 5 available SWIS activity types. You'll need to select the specific activity type that's appropriate for this RDRS entity. All right. So I mentioned that transfer processors and disposal facilities are required to have a SWIS ID. The other activity types, like recyclers, aren't required because they won't always necessarily have a SWIS ID. If they if they do or if they don't, for these entities, you'll see a question: does this reporting entity have a SWIS ID? And if you click no, then you won't need to enter your SWIS ID or activity type. They'll just be blank boxes on the form. And if you click yes, then you'll be required to enter those fields. And all the same stuff that applies for TPs and landfills will apply here. You'll have to enter a valid. The available options will populate in the SWIS activity type, and you'll be able to choose one. All right, so that's SWIS. The remaining user interface changes all occur inside of a quarterly report. So what this slide shows is really just the steps to create a quarterly report. There are some images on the next slide. So really the highlight that I wanted to emphasize here is that these changes all occur in 2025 Q1 and later quarterly report. So none of the rest of the information changes that you'll see occur in 2022, 2023, and so on. It's just 2025 Q1 and later. To create a quarterly report, you'll need to click the quarterly reports link in the left sidebar of RDRS, which will take you to the quarterly report search screen. And on that page, there's a button for add report. Clicking the add report button takes you to the create quarterly report form. And there you select the RDRS ID, the reporting period, and the reporting requirement. So assuming you've done all that and click save, you'll be taken to a new quarterly report. Within quarterly reports, there are 3 types of changes: collection method, mixed plastic waste export, and constituent material types. We'll talk about collection method first. So collection method refers to the source of material in terms of source sector, segregation extent, and stream. This comes from regulations 1815.2A 10.5. And one example of this is contract haul commercial mixed solid waste. Entities excluding food waste self-haulers will report tons by collection method for recovery-related materials. And I'll show you what that looks like in the upcoming slides. So inside of a new quarterly report, we have added a new tab called Collection Methods. This tab will appear after instructions for all activities. And on this tab, you'll need to enter 2 things: the methods that you use from a collection method, and the tons for different collection methods. So what does that first part look like? The methods talks about how you gather this information. So like many of our tabs in RDRS, we have a box at the top that says methods used to determine, dot, dot, dot. In this case, it's methods used to determine collection method. So if you click edit, you'll be able to select methods. You'll have to select one or more and then click save. The particular methods that are available vary a little bit by activity type. So the methods that you see for your reporting entity may differ from what we can see on the screen here. These options, I think, are specific to recyclers. So contract haulers, for example, won't see these exact methods. Once you've selected your methods, you'll need to enter tons. There are a few things to note here before showing you how the tons work. Our collection methods are organized into 4 tables, which you can see on the screen. There will be collection methods associated with contract haul commercial, contract haul residential, self-hauled, and received from a reporting entity. These all come from the previously published methods, and there's a link to those on the slide. We published those, I think, in October or November of last year. So those have all been available for you to look at. Contract haulers will not see tables 3 and 4 because they only deal, as their name implies, with contract haul material. But all the other entities will see all 4 tables. So how does actually entering tons work? So this slide shows the contract haul commercial table, just as an example. There are different options in the table, and each row is an option. Each row has an edit button. To enter tons, you'll have to click edit, and then you can enter tons with up to 2 decimals, click save, and then that will save the collection method. One of the important points to note here is that you don't have to enter tons for every single collection method. It's really just you enter tons for the ones that are relevant for you. So if you only receive tons or only have tons from contract haul commercial, multi-bin recyclables, you would only enter tons for that row. No need to, make up numbers for all the other collection methods. So now we're moving on to mixed plastic waste export. Briefly, what is that? So mixed plastic waste, first of all, is that accept these mixtures that are solely number 1, number 2, or number 5 are not mixed plastic waste. That comes from statute. Likewise, mixtures that are solid waste or green materials sent to landfill beneficial reuse, those are not mixed plastic waste either. That comes from our regs. And entities excluding food waste self-hauls for tons of mixed plastic waste exported with material type. But export excludes Canada, Mexico, and tribal lands in the US. And origins will be reported for tons as a whole. So you won't report tons per definition or per material type. It's just as a whole. And I'll show you what that looks like. So the first step for mixed plastic waste export is to actually indicate on the Outflows tab that you have mixed plastic waste export streams. So I'm not showing you the details of the Outflows tab here, since I'm assuming that most of you are familiar with how to report outflows, since that's something that everyone does in RDRS. On the Outflows tab, there's an edit box. You click the edit, or there's an edit button. You click the edit button, and then that opens up a box where you can select the material streams. And you'll select mixed plastic waste export. The rest of the material streams that you see on the screen, not all of them are available for all activity types. So the material streams you may see may differ from what screen, but I just wanted to note that. The important stream, though, for our purposes right now is mixed plastic waste export. So let's assume that you've selected that and you click save. The Outflows page will reload, and now you'll see a mixed plastic waste export stream box on the page, which has its own button, Add Mixed Plastic Waste Export Outflow. So if you click that button, you'll be taken to a form for creating it, and that's the mixed export outflow. which will require you to use a destination country and ton sent. The destination country will not include, as I mentioned, United States, Canada, or Mexico. So you could choose, for example, Cambodia. That's what I've chosen in the image there. And choose a material type. The material type dropdown will be limited to material to qualify as mixed plastic waste. So you won't see, for example, aluminum cans, but plastic is a mixture of plastics. So you'll see that. And then you'll enter tonnage information. And, that's limited to 2 decimals for standard in RDRS. So once you've saved that out, if you need to enter outflows to the same destination. So for example, if you send other material besides number 3 through 7 bottles to Cambodia, you'll be able to add those additional material on this offload details page after you send the initial material. The same as our material streams in RDRS. So that's why we're doing it that way. Once you've added all of your plastic waste that you need to, you'll need to add origins for those. To add origins, to report origins for export and mixed plastic waste, you'll do that on the Mixed Plastic Waste Export Origins tab. So that's a new tab that we have in RDRS. And there you'll need to report not only origins, but also the methods that you use to determine those origins. I'll show you what that looks like now. So to report the methods, you'll see a methods box used to determine jurisdiction of origin. Click the edit as per usual for our methods boxes, and then you'll have to select one or more methods. If you select the alternative method, which is available and you can see on the screen, you'll need to enter a short description of what that alternative method is. One thing I did want to note here is that for transfer processors, this method information is not reported on the Mixed Plastic Waste Export Origins tab. Instead, it's reported on the Outflows tab because transfer processors, they report the methods for the origins for solid waste, green material, beneficial reuse, and mixed plastic waste export all at once on the Outflows tab, rather than repeating that information separately on each of those other tabs. So TPs do it on the Outflows tab, but everybody else will do that on the Mixed Plastic Waste Export Origins tab. Once you've entered your methods, you'll be able to enter the jurisdiction of origin, and that looks the same as our existing origins tabs. But for those of you who haven't had to enter any origins previously, what's going here, there's a table with columns for jurisdiction, host assigned, state, country, tribal land, ton sent, and percentage. To add a jurisdiction of origin, you'll need to click a button called Add Jurisdiction, and that will cause a new row to appear. And once that row appears, you can select your jurisdiction from different columns. You can select an in California jurisdiction from the jurisdiction of origin column. You can select a jurisdiction that's another state in the US from the state column, or another country or tribal land from the country and tribal land columns respectively. Then you'll need to enter tons in the ton sent column. The percentage sent column is not editable. Instead, that auto calculates a value based on the ton sent. And really the percentage sent column there is just is there as a sanity check. So you can see when you enter tons, does the percentage look right? If you enter tons and the percentage says 1,000%, okay, that's clear you have a typo. It's really just there as a helpful column. All right, so you'll repeat that as needed for each of your jurisdictions. But what is this Add Host Assigned Waste button? I mentioned the Add Jurisdiction. What the Add Host Assigned Waste button does is allow you to enter tons that you are host assigning to your facility because you otherwise were unable to determine where that material came from. So you're assuming it came from your own facility. You can only add one such row. So just combine all those host assigned tons into one when you report the ton sent. If you need to edit or delete existing, you can do that. There will be edit or delete buttons once you save an individual row. So you can edit a row and change the tons or the jurisdiction, or if needed, you can delete a row. Once you're done making all changes and adding on jurisdictions that are required, you'll need to make sure that the total of the tons sent here matches the total of your outflows. So 800.12 tons in total across all of your mixed plastic waste export destinations. The total of mixed plastic waste export origins tab also needs to be 800.12 tons. And you'll see that by the percentage sent equaling 100. Sometimes it may, due to rounding issues, say 99.99, that's okay too. Really just, we're looking for the tons sent to match. All right, so now we're on the constituent material types, this last portion of the webinar here. What does that refer to? Well, certain material flows in RDRS, such as recycling, composting, require material type information. And mixed plastic waste is another one that requires specific material types. For those streams, and again, 2025 Q, if you choose a heterogeneous material type, one that's not specific, you'll need to tell us what are the constituents of that material type. This identification won't require tons, so it's really just saying what are the material types in that particular outflow. If you don't know how to certify that you don't know what that looks like. So first of all, let's start. You've created an outflow that requires a material type. In this case, let's just say it's end use. So you select end use as a material, click the add end use outflow button. Then you'll be taken to the page where we're actually adding the material type. And let's say you check mixed recyclables. Mixed recyclables is heterogeneous. It's a generic mixture of just mixed recyclables. So that's clearly not very specific. So in this, when you choose such a material type, what's called the constituent material types box will appear. So you'll see a green label, constituent materials for heterogeneous material type. So there will be a button there called Add Constituent Material. If you click the Add Constituent Material button, then a new dropdown will appear that allows you to search. For example, in the screen on the image, I'm typing aluminum, and there's an option there for aluminum cans. So this constituent materials dropdown will be limited to types that are specific, that are homogeneous, they're not mixtures. And you'll be able to select that constituent and then just repeat the process as needed, however many constituents are in a particular mixture. You'll note here that there's not a tons column, so tons are not required for the constituents. It's just really what are the constituents, it's what's required. We did want to note though that for a single outflow, we want you to include any constituents that are sorted into the outflow by design or specification. And if an outflow if you have multiple outflows that have different sets of constituents, you should report that separately. So if you send two outflows and one is a mixture of aerosol cans and beverage cans versus another, both aluminum, and another outflow is a mixture of glass CRV and other glass, those would be two separate outflows and you report the constituents separately. We don't want you to, just combine all that together into one outflow. We want the per outflow constituents, the per outflow tonnage too. So I mentioned that there is a way to not report that information. So if you don't happen to know, and you cannot determine what the constituents are, you can select this checkbox where I certify that I cannot determine the list of constituent materials. We really want to emphasize here that you should only do this if you don't know the materials. This is not meant to be kind of a get out of reporting button. So our last point before we go on to the Q&A session, I see there are a few Q&As already. As with any existing reporting, for the new reporting that we discussed here, CalRecycle is going to be reviewing this information to identify any errors and points of confusion, and we will reach out to you for additional information to So we're going to be doing all of our same review process for this new information as we do for existing quarterly reports. So with that, I think we'll turn it back. We'll turn it over to the Q&A session. Turn it back to Steve, our faithful moderator here. Questions should really focus on the topics that we've discussed during this webinar. And again, I'll note that if you're watching via the Cal EPA broadcast, or if you have questions later on, you can always email us at rdrs@calrecycle.ca.gov. And the slide does say the chat here, but really by chat, we actually mean the Q&A. Apologies for that confusion. So thanks. I'll turn it back to Steve.
Thank you, Eric. So like Eric said, we'll now move into the Q&A portion of today's webinar. Just to reiterate, please use that Q&A function that's located in the bottom of your Zoom window, either inside of or next or nearby the More button. You could type your written questions there. You can also raise your hand using the raise hand feature to be called on, ask your question verbally. You'll be asked to unmute, and then you can go ahead with your question. For those on webcast, please email rdrs@calrecycle.ca.gov. Use the subject RDRS Public Meeting 320 question, and we'll be able to tackle that for you. So just wanted to highlight, we've already had a Q and then now an A. Somebody asked, are Mexico and Canada still exempted from the definition of export? And Eric has already kindly replied in the chat there in the Q&A that for mixed plastic waste export, Mexico and Canada are excluded. Then we have another question that's being responded to, I see. Does the constituent materials refer to what we accept in our recycling stream, or does this refer to something that we determine through periodic characterizations? Would you like to answer that live, or are you still working on your answer?
Sure, I can answer that, Steve. So the constituent materials, this is really about outflows. No one reports inflows of recycling in RDRS. So if you're receiving inflows of recycling, you're not reporting that in RDRS. And in terms of the outflows, if you're sending an individual outflow, we want to know what are the constituents of that particular outflow.
Oh, so sorry to jump in. I think the sound, we're not able to. We just lost your audio.
That's weird. Sorry.
Now it's back. Yeah, now it's back.
Okay. Apologies for that. Yeah, so as I was saying, I'm not sure how much you heard, so I'll just start over. No one reports inflows of recycling in RDRS. So constituent materials will not refer to inflows. What we're talking about here are outflows of material. If you are sending an outflow of recycling, the constituents refer to what are the constituents in that outflow. If you determine those constituents through periodic characterizations, that would be how you do it. If you are doing it based on another method, that is up to your discretion.
And I might add, what the intent here is really based on the design of your sorting activities or specification of outflows. So what is it that you are by design putting in those bales? That would generally be the expectation is. So by design, you have some specification of what should be in that bale. That's what we would want to be indicated in the constituent materials.
Thank you both. We'll go to the next question here. Can you please provide definitions for the following types: single bin recycling, multi-bin recycling, mixed solid waste? I think that might be referring to the collection method.
Yeah, so I don't want to provide a specific definition of those off because it is something inappropriate. But what I will do is refer you to the collection methods document that we previously published and is linked in the presentation.
Makes sense because there's a number of collection methods there, and circumstances differ, so you'll want to select the one that is most appropriate and defines your that type most appropriately. So yeah, please refer to that that attachment. All right, we have another question here in the Q&A from Michelle Goodman of Lassen County. Michelle writes, I operate many transfer stations. I have a contract hauler who picks up the recyclables from each of the transfer stations and they take them to the recycling center. Do we report an RDRS or just one of us?
Are you answering that, Steve, or do you want me to?
Oh yeah, I can take that. Sure. So yeah, I think one of the helpful resources that I think I'll just start by pointing to is what we call the Do I Need to Register in RDRS tool, and you can access that. I'll put a link to that in the chat here. It's the best way to get to it is tinyurl.com/RDRS-tool. That there, you can go through a series of questions and basically ascertain, what your reporting requirements might look like and whether your business facility or operation would be required to register and report in RDRS. It's an automated determination. It's not sort of, you shouldn't be taken as, that's the end all be all determination, but rather as a helpful kind of guide. We have some specific definitions for contract hauler and recycler and transfer processor. All of those kind of correspond to different regulatory sections. So I don't know if it's necessary. I don't know if we're going to be able to give you a definitive answer right here. But a contract hauler, I guess, just backing up, is defined as a person who takes material from a generator and hauls it, subject to de minimis tonnage threshold, either out of state or to a direct land application. Those are the only two kind of instances where a contract hauler would be required to register and report pursuant to RDRS. So yeah, I think we just need to maybe circle back and maybe chat offline. Be happy to talk with you further about what exactly the obligations might be. Generally speaking, permitted transfer stations that handle at least the de minimis tonnage threshold of like 100 tons per quarter for reportable materials is considered a reporting entity that would have to report. Recycler composters who sell or transfer 100 tons or more of reportable materials per quarter would also need to report. So if those conditions, there's a few other things that we would I think want to establish, but provided that those conditions are met, it sounds like there would need to be a reporting obligation. So try your hand at that tool, I guess, long story short. And if you have any further questions, I'd be happy to get with you one-on-one, and we can go over what your obligations might look like. So hopefully that helps, Michelle. Next question from anonymous participant. Since Mexico and Canada are exempted, if you had selected either one of them instead of Cambodia, will the system still require the full export report, or would it tell you that your activity is exempted?
Yeah, so as I typed in the chat or in the Q&A, and I'm trying to type answers since apparently my audio has been cutting out. Apologies for that. On the mixed plastic waste export stream, you will not see Canada or Mexico as destination options, so you just won't even be able to select those. If you do need to send material to Canada or Mexico as recycling or composting, you would use the recycling composting stream.
Thanks for that, Eric. All right, on to the next question from anonymous participant. For outflows of mixed recyclables where we now have to report constituent materials, what is the burden of proof? We send mixed recyclables that originate from franchise customers, and we outline which materials are accepted in that stream. However, as we all know, people don't perfectly follow those rules. So for example, there might be carpet someone threw into their blue bin. Are we expected to monitor these streams closely to capture anything that might be present versus materials that are supposed to be present?
One thing I might flag with this question is it seems to suggest that there's no sorting going on. And so in the case of a facility reporting an outflow and they are not sorting that material, I believe that would be an appropriate usage of the checkbox where you would not have the ability to identify specific constituent materials. And as I mentioned earlier, where you have some control over it, by design you are sorting into various outflows by specification and type of commodity you were selling, that is where you would be able to identify what material types you are by design putting into those outflows.
Thanks for that, Dan. All right, next question. In part, the definition at 18815.2 for collection method from haulers and generators states that we need to report source sector as defined in 17402, which refers to materials collected as specified in Article 3 regulations. Will the system allow facilities in the 150-ish jurisdictions with valid waivers to opt out of reporting source sector since they don't have Article 3 compliant collection systems? Yeah, I can try to take a stab at this. So yeah, I think let's see, as it relates to source sector, I'm not sure. I guess I'm not sure I agree with the how this question is phrased. Our regs define source sector in a certain way and outlines what is required to be reported upon. I got to tell you, I'm not familiar with Article 3 regulations. As far as I'm aware, facilities and operations that are required to report source sector, are required to do so in the context of, Article 9.25, which is the RDRS regulations. The RDRS regulations lay out, what and how source sector is to be reported pursuant to RDRS. So that's my wheelhouse. That's sort of what I'm most familiar with. So yeah, I'm not aware of an exemption that would allow a facility to not provide source sector when that's otherwise a requirement pursuant to our regulations. Not sure who this person is, but please go ahead and email me or email the RDRS inbox if you'd like to have a follow-up conversation, because I think there's a little bit more here, and I think we just want to keep the questions a little bit more general for now. We'll go to the next question, and also if you asked a question and want to follow up or add some more context or flavor to your remarks, go ahead and use that raise hand function. We'll call on you, and you can unmute and follow up if you need to. We'll go up to the next question here. Again, from anonymous participant. So let's say I'm a transfer processor that simply consolidates and sends mixed recyclables to a separate MRF that actually does the sorting. Since I'm not required to sort the mixed recyclable stream at my facility per 1383, since it's simply consolidated and sent to the MRF, this would be an appropriate use case to check the box. I certify I cannot determine the constituent material. That sounds in the vein of what Dan was saying, I think a bit earlier, which was, to the extent, you're not actually doing the sorting and you don't know, what might be in it. I think that sounds like it would be an appropriate use of the box that you mentioned, but correct me if I'm wrong. And then we have a question from Mariano Chapa. They write, for transfer stations and landfills, what are the requirements to report collection methods for these facilities?
Yeah, I can touch on that, Steve, and I'll type this out too, and just in case my audio is choppy. So for transfer stations, the requirements for collection method are to report collection method for material that is received for purposes other than disposal or beneficial reuse, so meaning related activities. If you are a transfer processor and you're only receiving material from another reporting entity, collection methods that are specific to that. So you would say, for example, I got 10,000 tons from a broker transporter, if that was the case. If you're a transfer station and you're receiving material from contract haulers, you should be getting the collection method information from the contract hauler, 10,000 tons from commercial vehicles, for example. And for landfills, on the other hand, they need to report collection method for material, it's more or less the same for landfills, right? So just based on the way you receive material, that's how you'll report the collection method. And the options for those collection methods, again, are shown in the linked document that's in the PowerPoint.
And is it it might not be where it might be redundant to add, but one thing there is that you're responsible for reporting the collection method of material that you receive, not back to its original collection method, but basically the step you received it from. So if that step is receiving it from another reporting entity, you don't need to go back to however it was originally collected at curbside or however. It's how you were getting it. So if you're receiving direct haul from collection routes, you would report collection methods appropriate to that. If you're receiving it from another reporting entity, you would report appropriately to that, if that makes sense. So it's how you are receiving that material, or the material that you are receiving, how it was that step before you get it.
Excellent clarification. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan and Eric. I again put a link to the public meeting notice into the chat, where you can access the slide deck and save that for you know, your own purposes, reference purposes. This is going to be recorded and put onto the website as well. That will be coming soon. We had a question come in from the inbox asking if it's possible to request a copy of the slide deck and the links in there. So, you know, we have it on the user is reporting that they're not able to access the CalRecycle webpage. I tell you what, if you want to email, well, it sounds like you emailed in, we can send you a copy of the presentation, since it sounds like you're not, you know, you're having trouble accessing the website. Not sure why that might be the case, but yeah, we'll make sure to provide you a copy specifically. All right, we have another question from Mariano Chapa asking, starting Q1 2025, do we need to report green waste we use for AIC, ADC, or is that still exempt for landfills? I can take a stab at that. Yeah, so not sure where you heard that green waste for AIC or ADC would be exempt. It's the case that, you know, pursuant to AB 1594, or maybe been SB, that you know, green waste ADC as of January 1, 2020, I believe it was is considered disposal and counts against a jurisdiction. It's not the case that green waste ADC and AIC, it's never been exempt. If you, to the extent that a landfill uses green waste ADC or AIC, that's alternative daily cover or alternative intermediate cover. Yeah, that certainly needs to be reported upon. You know, we have tabs set up to receive those info. So yeah, just want to you know, dispel the notion that, you know, that's exempt. Yeah, it's
Yeah, and trying to kind of peel back the layers of the onion. The fact that 1594 designates that as disposal, you know, so the use of green material or green waste as alternative daily cover counts as disposal. That does not mean that should be reported as disposal. It should be reported accurately as green material used for alternative daily cover or alternative intermediate cover. It's on the back end when we're calculating total disposal amounts at a statewide or jurisdiction basis that is counted as disposal, but it should still be reported accurately as beneficial reuse at the landfill.
all right. And then we have another question here. It says, for compost facilities, what is the biggest difference? I'm not, you're going to have to be a little bit more specific. Yeah, please raise your hand and unmute. Yeah, if you I'm not sure who this comment is coming from, but feel free to raise your hand and provide some additional context to your question. Otherwise, I'm afraid we're going to have to move to the next one. Just giving a second for person to come out of the woodwork. Not seeing a raised hand, so I'm afraid we're going to have to move on. But if you want to clarify later, yeah, please feel free. We have another question from anonymous participant. Does the definition of contract hauler referring to private contracts only apply to private contracts for curbside collection service to a jurisdiction in the same manner as a franchise hauler, or does it also include private haulers such as individual lawn care companies or junk haulers for hire? Well, the definition of contract hauler, I don't want to speak off the cuff, but that's found in section 18815.2 of the RDRS regulations. And upon just taking a look at that, it says contract hauler means any person, whether through a franchise or private contract, paid to collect and move material from a generator to a destination out of state, a reporting entity, or an end user. Any material delivered by a contract hauler is referred to as contract hauled in this article. So that's 18815. That's Title 14, California Code of Regulations, Section 18815.2. A16. So feel free to peruse that, and if you have another question or more specific, please feel free to raise your hand or ask another question. All right, we have Michelle Goodman who'd like to ask a question via the raised hand function, so I'll ask you to unmute and say your question. Welcome in.
Hi, thank you. Okay, so this is just, I'm trying to re-clarify the question that I had asked earlier. So I have some transfer stations. I currently report in RDRS because, so I take the solid waste, for instance, from the transfer station, take it to our landfill. So I do the transfer station ones, say, this is the jurisdiction it comes from, this is where I'm sending it to, and that it all makes total sense for the solid waste aspect. But now the question is with the recyclables. So currently what's been happening is we have self-haul a collection facility for just the general population to bring their recyclables to the transfer station. Then our contract hauler picks up those recyclables. They don't take them back to our landfill, where they take them to their recycling center that they have a contract with. So it's just like we collect them, but they pick them up and take them elsewhere. So my question was, do they report all those tons in the RDRS now, or do I say I collected them, I transferred them to the contract hauler, then the contract hauler says I got them from the transfer station, and then I sent them on to the recycling center? Is that how it goes?
Right. So yeah, there's a couple of things that might be at play, I think. Yeah. It depends on I think a couple different factors. Namely, does that company that comes and picks up the material, are they the ones kind of determining the destination, or are they simply being told to move it to this other facility?
No, that's their own contracts. So they just pick it up. I don't even honestly know where they take it. I just know they take it and they collect it from their their commercial hauler route in town and from the residential hauler route. So they also collect all the recyclables that way as well. They take all of those materials from our transfer stations plus their routes, and then they take all of that together as one lump sum of product and take that to the recycler. And so I know that they have an RDRS as well. So they currently report in there, but I'm wondering now, because we didn't used to weigh it at the transfer station. Well, I mean, we don't even have the ability to weigh it there. And they would take it all. And then when they gave it to the recycling center, that's when the recycling center told them the total volume weight wise of what they sent over to them. So, but now am I understanding it correctly where, for instance, say I have 5 or 6 transfer stations, would each individual one, would they need to then take that material, weigh it, document that, take the other one from a different transfer station, weigh that, document that, and so on until they have all of those numbers from each one of the transfer stations and from their routes that they have, their commercial routes and their residential routes? Do they need to like track all that separately and then report it all separately? Like tell me, hey, from transfer station 1, I received this amount. And then I put that into RDRS. It says like, I gave this to the contract hauler. And then the contract hauler says, I got this much from the transfer station. Now I then take it the rest of the way to the recycling center. So that amount is reported twice. But like I got it, I gave it to them, they got it, they gave it to the recycler.
Yeah. I think I'm getting what you're putting down, picking up what you're putting down, but I think we should maybe chat further, set up a time, but it sounds like just from a terminology standpoint, that the entity coming to get the material from the transfer station, I think it would be better characterized or classified as what we call a broker or transporter. Whereas a contract hauler, like I read the definition off a little while ago, pretty much exclusively picks up from what's considered a generator of material. However, to the extent the transfer station, is a permitted solid waste facility, I think potentially, broker transporter might be a more accurate descriptor for them for the RDRS reporting purposes, just because that's, again, the broker transporter is defined as a person who picks up from a reporting entity as opposed to, a generator. So long story short, I think we should follow up, but if you don't, to the extent that it's this other entity that's determining the destination of the recyclables, that is being sent off, that the transfer station would indicate, would report essentially a brokering transporting outflow of the tonnages, of recyclable material that they, sent to that, that were picked up by them over the course of the quarter. So, I think that might be, what's called for in this scenario. But again, transfer stations have to report, where the outflows of the recyclables, unless the transfer station is, I guess, is falls below that 100 tons per quarter.
It's definitely not 100 tons per quarter. We're very small, extremely rural, and so definitely they do not collect that much.
Okay, then I guess that's that kind of, it sounds like there might not even be a reporting obligation just because it's under the de minimis.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, because when I heard that total amount, I'm like, oh, we don't even come close to that. Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like it might not even be something that we would need to be collecting. So, but let's definitely follow up. Yeah, find a time to chat through that a little bit further. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Next, we'll go over to Mariano.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking my question. Sorry, just I was a little left unclear. Thank you for spelling it out for me, at least to that extent, my question. But I was still I'm a little unsure because as far as RDRS, there's a section under both the inflows and outflows tabs that read an important message, and the message just the way it's worded is a little confusing as far as what I need to report or don't need to report. For example, the statement says when adding outflows, the material streams, green material for potential beneficial reuse and non-green material for potential beneficial reuse, do not refer to the material sent for recycling, composting, brokering, transporting, or end use, right? The beneficial reuse material streams are to be used for materials that are or may potentially be used by a landfill for beneficial reuse as defined by Title 14, such as alternative daily cover, ADC, which is part of my question. Do not report outflows of recycling, composting, brokering, transport, or end use using the beneficial reuse stream. So it's a little, I mean, honestly, I mean, I'm reading that, it's up to interpretation. So I just wanted some clarity on that because we do have transfer stations and we do have landfills that receive green waste, right? But they not in any way do they use it for ADC or AIC. All that stuff's reporting in the outflows tabs. Anything that comes in does get reported in the outflows tab at least, but not. We do not use that for ADC. That's what I'm a little thrown off by the what needs to be reported and how and where it needs to be reported.
Thanks for your question, Mariano. I'll try to take a stab at that, and then I'll invite my colleagues to continue along. Basically, the that message is intended to basically kind of clarify, or make a distinction between, beneficial reuse is a term of art that's applies to alternative daily cover, alternative intermediate cover,
right?
Construction and landscaping, specifically in the context of a landfill. So if you were sending off green material for those for that specific purpose, or green or non-green material for that specific purpose, you would use those tables to fill in that information.
Right.
If it were going to a composter, a mulch,
or recycling,
or for recycling, you would want to use the recycling and composting outflow stream type.
There, okay.
That's what that message is
right,
trying to.
Right. All right. So in which case, okay. So in which case that we understood it correctly, where it's like, yeah, if you are receiving that material and you are sending it out for recycling and or composting, report it in the outflows tab section. Got it. Okay.
In the outflows tab under the recycling and composting stream,
right.
As opposed to the green and non-green material for
green and
non-green,
because there are sometimes there are some stuff that's used for not green, but that falls under the definition of non-green beneficial, and we report that as part of either construction or landscaping, right, wherever it lands, but it's mainly been construction, but that's not what the green. The green has always historically been reported in the outflows tab. We put the RD number of the facility it goes to and tons that was sent. And we choose the definition that's available to us, which is green waste. I don't put anything other than green waste. Does that work? Will that work for this particular scenario?
Yeah, I don't want to make like a
general statement. Yeah.
on that. Every scenario is a little bit different, I think. So yeah, I would say let's get in touch and just confirm, and we can go from there.
Sure. No, thank you for that though. Yeah, that just you answered my question though. But yes, that'd be nice to meet.
Perfect. Yeah, we welcome that. Thanks for the question. Sorry, we have another question. Are we reporting MSW trash outbound and ADC as well? Generally speaking, if you're subject to the reporting thresholds and, you're above the de minimis tonnage threshold requiring you to report, yes, you would have to report on solid waste. We have a table for that, as well as alternative daily cover outflows. Yeah, that's generally what's required by reporting entities. But if you have a more specific question or comment, feel free to bring that up either as another Q&A or by raising your hand, and we can kind of get into some of the specifics, because some of it does, again, depend on the reporting entity type and a number of other factors. So I'm trying to be careful not to overgeneralize here. So
and to that end as well, so a facility that's sending MSW out for disposal, presumably, but also sending out beneficial reuse materials to a landfill. The facility sending that, let's say it's a transfer processor, just for argument's sake, they would not be the ones saying that it is alternative daily cover material. And that's because it's really the landfill that has that ability to say, this is how this material was used, whether it be alternative daily cover, alternative intermediate cover, construction, landscaping, erosion control, and so on, all those types of beneficial reuse as it's defined in this context, specifically used by landfills. So a transfer processor doesn't necessarily need to know that that material was used for alternative daily cover. It just needs to know the material type they're sending. So again, by design, this is what we are sending. Let's say it's crushed gravel or something. Or even compost, that we're sending compost, and as we understand it, is for potential beneficial reuse. That's why it's potential at this point, because it hasn't actually been used for beneficial reuse. That occurs at the landfill, and the landfill is the one that says, yes, we use this many tons of this material in this way.
Thanks for that clarification, Dan. I'm not seeing any more questions in the Q&A, nor raised hands, nor RDRS inbox questions. So I'm just going to pause and just see if there's any last minute things that might come in. If so, we'd be happy to answer it. Of course, we're here till 12. But if not, and we're kind of reached our the end of the questions, we might be able to close things out a few minutes early. But really appreciate the comments that have come in. I think it's a great opportunity for us to clarify, some of these things that come up in the reporting, especially, as it relates to, the term beneficial reuse. I know that, can throw people off who don't, necessarily interface directly with landfills. Of course, it's a term of art here in the waste and recycling industry, and it has a very specific meaning as opposed to, other kinds of like recycling or composting diversion operations and activities. So yeah, always a good chance to clarify and make sure that everybody's on the same page as far as, the kinds of tables, or that, where you want to put various information in our tables, in the outflows tab and in other tabs. Yeah, really appreciate the good conversation that we've all had this morning. And once again, doing a quick check here, no raised hands, no Q&A questions, no inbox questions. So I think that's a good place to kind of leave it there for today. Of course, this isn't the end. This is, this is only the beginning. As we roll this out, I'm sure there'll be more questions that come up, and that's where we need you to do your part and email in when you have them to rdrs@calrecycle.ca.gov. We'd be happy to take a look at some of the questions and have a discussion with you and figure out what makes sense in terms of the reporting. So again, thank you all so much for being on our webinar today and for joining us. Thanks again to Eric and Dan for their contributions, and all the other program staff. Thank you to our AV services. Thank you to our interpreter. I want to give a shout out to our interpreter, whose name is Grisel Villafana. So thank you again, and really appreciate everybody's time. So if you have anything else, please get in touch with us. And if not, happy reporting, and we'll see you in the next one. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you. I'm now going to close the webinar.